Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Therapy on Tap. In today's episode, I want to talk about loneliness. Now, there's obviously a lot to say about loneliness. Loneliness has been a hot topic the last few years because people are feeling more and more lonely. And there's a lot of different reasons for this. Many of them are societal reasons, societal changes. I'm not going to get too heavy on the societal reasons today because I think for the purpose of this video, I want to focus on the individual, right? There are things obviously we need to do from a societal point of view, but there's only so much we can do right now to change that. So I want to focus on the individual. And I do think that by working on the individual, if we all work together on our individual selves, we can make larger changes as a society. But before I get into those individual reasons, I first want to say to you, it's not your fault that you feel lonely. The world right now is a very lonely place. Despite the fact that we seem so connected with social media. But, it's interesting. Social media reminds me a lot like living in a big city where you walk around and you feel the hustle and bustle and you feel all these people around you. You see them at least, but then you get home and you feel isolated and alone. Everybody's doing their own thing. We're all around each other, but really we're doing our own thing. We're not really there for each other. And then you go to a small town or a small community. There's not that many people, but everybody's got each other's back. It's an interesting psychological phenomenon that occurs in these sorts of settings. And social media is a city on steroids. Everybody's there, but no one's really there. And because social media is so distant, it's emotionally distant. We still feel our emotions, but the people on the other side of things, it's so easy to bully. It's so easy to be cruel to someone. It's so easy to alienate someone because you don't have to look them in their eye and do it. And I think most of the people online who are bullying, they actually would not be bullies in their real life because either the empathy would hit them or the fear would hit them. But online, it's so easy to be mean and cruel to other people. And so we're pushing each other away. We're creating these echo chambers where you can only say certain things if you have certain political beliefs or certain moral beliefs or certain interests even. The minute you say anything against the norm, you're banished. And it really is being like excommunicated, right? Throughout history, if you said the wrong thing in the wrong place, you would literally get banished from the country or banished from the community. And that's what is happening in these social communities online. The emotional feeling that we have of being banished and removed is still the same, even though it's virtual, because we feel a connection in a community and then we're told that no, we're actually not welcome here. Goodbye, get out of here. It's completely devastating. So obviously we need to be kinder with ourselves. We need to be careful how we use social media, and we need to realize that even though it's just words on a keyboard, it is damaging people's lives. But I think that's all I'm going to say about the societal problem. Today I want to focus on the individual. How do you, as an individual who's struggling with loneliness, how do you work through loneliness? Now, if you're feeling lonely, there may be various reasons for this. It may be that you actually just don't have many people around you. And look, we're social creatures. You need to have people around you. But maybe because of life circumstances, or because you struggle with anxiety, or whatever the case may be, you just don't have many people in your corner. And that is a real objective loneliness. And I'm not saying that other forms of loneliness are any worse or any better or anything like that, but that is a real loneliness. You're actually not connected to anybody. And then we have loneliness where we seem to on paper have friends, or we know some people, we have some family, but maybe our relationships are just not quite what we would like them to be. Or maybe we're friends with people out of convenience or out of desperation. We don't actually know much about these people. We're just sort of going along because, hey, something's better than nothing. Whatever your scenario is, I think the first thing you have to offer to yourself is a little bit of empathy and a little bit of understanding. There's this sort of irony with loneliness that we feel lonely, which means we feel like we don't belong in the world. And yet there are so many people who are simultaneously feeling that same exact feeling, which means there actually is belongingness in your loneliness. I know that might sound bizarre, but when you're feeling lonely, you retreat and you go into your own world and you go into your own mind. And an idle mind is very dangerous, especially when it's not feeling well, because all it's going to think of is negativity. So now not only are you lonely, but now you're thinking of all the reasons why you are lonely and why you should be lonely. And you start thinking you're a loser, and you start thinking there's something wrong with you. All these negative thoughts, or maybe some of it is even anger towards the outside world for putting you in this position. Whatever the case may be, you have these intense emotions that are pulling you inside, and you're thinking about yourself. And I understand that. There's nothing wrong with thinking about yourself. But the problem is, thinking about yourself too much will get you nowhere, because now you can't turn your vision to other people. And in order to connect with other people, you have to be able to look outwardly. So the first thing I would recommend is tap into your empathy for other people first. Think about somebody else in the world. It could be someone you know, could be a friend, a family member, or it could be an imaginary person who lives across in another country, all the way across the world. And think of that person who's struggling with loneliness and really try to tap in and empathize with that person. Get out of yourself for a minute and think about that person. And in doing so, I think two things will happen. One is you'll start to realize, again, you're not the only one, and there actually is a sense of belongingness there. You belong with those people. We all belong with those people. We've all felt that feeling of feeling alone. But the very fact that you're feeling alone means you are not the only one, because we have all felt that feeling. So by empathizing with someone else, you can now empathize with yourself without having to think about yourself and hate yourself and think about all those negative things. And when you focus on that other person, this imaginary other person, I want you to ask yourself, how would you talk to that person knowing that they were lonely? If you went to them, or they gave you a call and they started talking to you about how lonely and miserable they felt, how would you respond to them? I guarantee you it wouldn't be the way that you respond to yourself. It wouldn't be with self-hatred and self-loathing. It would be with empathy and openness and a friendly ear. You would want to know what's going on in their world. And that is what you need to offer to yourself. But, as human beings, we're not good at empathizing with ourselves. We're really, really bad at it. When something happens to someone else, we always find the silver lining, or we always find a way to understand what's going on. But when it happens to us, we blame ourselves, and we're really, really harsh on ourselves. And I think by turning your lens outward, you can start to empathize with people, and you can start to empathize with the concept of loneliness, the idea of it, because it is a terrible idea. This is why they use it in prisons to torture people. So empathize with that feeling. Is that going to make your loneliness go away? No, of course not. But here's where we start. I'm not a spiritual person by any means. I don't believe that we can connect with each other on any spiritual level. But what I do believe is that we can understand each other at a deep emotional level if we allow ourselves to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And by doing that, that allows us to connect with them and to connect with ourselves. I think the best way to connect with yourself is by connecting with somebody else, because you see the common ground, you see the humanity, you don't see all the little imperfections that you use to separate yourself from the world, which is why you feel lonely, because you feel you are different from everybody else. And that's why when you get lonely, and you feel that self-hatred and that self-loathing, you pick apart every little detail of who you are instead of realizing the humanity you share with everybody else in the world. And you owe at least that to yourself. So that's the first step in loneliness, is merely empathy and understanding, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, taking yourself out of yourself so you can empathize with yourself. And if you think this is just nonsense and mumbo jumbo, there's actually some really interesting research, which I will link to the bottom here, which shows, and this has been repeated in other studies, which shows that if you ask somebody to write down a story or a history of themselves, and you ask them to write it in the I form, the personal form, they have very strong negative emotional reactions to it. But if you have someone then just switch the language to either another name, a made-up name, or a third person, they're able to detach that painful emotional response, and they're able to see the story objectively. Just the same way, it's still their story. They're just putting a different pronoun in there or a different name in there, and now they don't feel as much pain. And this is because, as important as it is to self-reflect sometimes self-reflection is our biggest enemy, because at some point self-reflection is just rumination, and that is that whole recycling process of trying to edit yourself. And this is the second element of loneliness, which is when you feel lonely and you start to edit yourself and you start to judge yourself. Now you're afraid to reach out to people, and the more you pull in and the more you distance yourself from others, the more you criticize yourself, the more you feel like you're a burden to others, the more you feel like, well, it's been 2 weeks since I've talked to anyone. They're not going to want to talk to me. They're not thinking about me. Either they're mad at me because I haven't said anything, or they're on to a new best friend, or they're out with their family. They're doing their own thing. It's been too long. And the longer we wait, the more anxious we feel, and then the more we retreat. So this is what you have to be really, really careful. When you start feeling that loneliness, take some time, be by yourself for a minute, do that exercise, empathize with other people. But then when you notice that you have an urge to reach out to people and something stops you, that anxiety starts creeping in and it starts telling you, don't send that text. Don't ask that person how they're doing. Don't ask that person to spend time with you, because what if they say no? Then I'm going to be rejected and I'm going to feel even worse. Better I say nothing, feel better, quote unquote, better, and just wait it out. I'll just wait. I'll wait for someone to reach out to me. But that only breeds not only anxiety, that breeds resentment. Because then we start getting angry that other people are not reaching out to us, even though they don't know that we're lonely. And you might sit there and think, well, they should know. They haven't talked to me in a while. Well, they could say the same thing for you, right? We get so caught up in how we're feeling and what our experience is. Let's think about what that other person's experience may be. Maybe when you send that text, they'll be excited. Maybe they'll think, oh man, I haven't heard from John in a while. I wonder what he's up to. Man, I've been so nervous to text John. I'm so glad he reached out to me first. See, that's the other thing we don't realize. We're so caught up in our own heads that we think that our act of vulnerability, by showing that we're wanting connection, we start to think to ourselves, oh no, this is going to make me look needy and desperate. And the irony is, the other person on the end of the other line is feeling the exact same thing. You guys are playing the exact same game. You're both avoiding, you're both pushing away. And each day that passes, you're both saying to yourselves, well, it's another day lost and gone. Can't text him now. As hard as it is, it's the only way to escape this cycle. And you have to say, you know what? Even if I do get rejected, even if he doesn't want to see me again, or she doesn't want to see me again, I need to take this chance for myself and for this person, because this person might need me as much as I need them. See, and that's, again, the other irony of loneliness. We all know that we're feeling it, but we're afraid to admit that we're feeling it. Everybody's feeling it. So there's really no risk in putting yourself out there, because the person on the other line wants to hear from you. And you know what? If they don't, that will sting. But now you know where you stand with that person. And now you can go find the people you actually connect with. And that might be the reason why, by the way, maybe you do have friends, but you don't feel connection, because there isn't a connection there. And you haven't really taken the step to take a chance to get rejected. Sometimes in life, it's good to get rejected, because getting rejected means you know where you stand, and now you can pivot and make another move. And now you can meet with people who actually want to reciprocate. You're right. Maybe your friend hasn't texted back because they don't like you anymore. Yeah, it'd be really hurtful, but now at least you're not sitting around wondering all day, where the hell is my friend? Why won't he text me anymore? Now you know. He doesn't want to be friends with you. That sucks. That is painful. But now you can do something about it, instead of just falling further and further back into your hole. Look, there's no easy fix to loneliness. And I can't promise you that you'll never feel loneliness again. We all feel loneliness at certain points in our life. Even when we're surrounded by people that love us, we feel lonely sometimes. And that is another level of pain and hell. And oftentimes that's because we're just feeling miserable and depressed. And again, that's that negative self-talk. We start feeling like people don't want us, that we're a burden. We push people away. And yet all it takes is to lean forward, take that risk, and all of a sudden your loneliness is cured. But again, the world we live in, it's hard not to feel lonely. You know, I was talking about social media before, but it's not just social media. It's our culture too. We're hyper independent. We don't want to depend on anybody, right? We're all like 95-year-old grandmothers who don't want the door open for us because I can do it. I can do it. Let me do it. But we're human beings. Everybody in the world depends on everybody else in the world. But we have adopted this culture of hyper independence where we want to believe that everything that we've done in our life is all because of ourselves. We want to take full responsibility, and full responsibility is good. There's nothing wrong with taking responsibility. The problem is we delude ourselves in thinking that other people didn't help us get where we are. There's no one who's in a good place in life who isn't where they are because of someone else. That's because we live in a society, and societies are interconnected by definition, whether it's the parents you grew up in, the culture you grew up in, the community, the friends. You know, the reality is if you were born in a different part of the world in a different time period, you would probably be a completely different person. We don't like to think of this. We like to think of, oh, you could have dropped me anywhere on the planet and I would be the same successful person that I've always been. And I don't want to get on a political rant here, but that is the belief of a lot of people. And that's just completely delusional. We're all dependent on the people and the culture around us, and we are all molded and shaped by that. And we all need that. So the next time you're feeling lonely, just remember you're not the only one, and there is your sense of belongingness, and you can tap into. Think about other people. Get out of yourself, because that rumination is just holding you back. Think about other people. Think about what their experiences is like. And through that, you'll actually be able to empathize with yourself. And two, be very careful about editing yourself. Be very careful about preventing yourself from taking risks when you're feeling lonely, because the odds are the person on the other end of that text or that phone call is feeling just as lonely as you, or at the very least, they would be just as excited to hear from you as you would be to hear from them. And you know what? If they're not, then maybe they're not the person for you. And that's okay. That means you can make a move and you can do something else with your life. Thanks again for listening in today, and I'll see you soon.